All right. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Orange Wheel podcast, where we support business leaders in understanding the monetary transition. Joined today by Ryan Kail. Ryan and I have been corresponding over LinkedIn for a number of months, following each other's interests in Bitcoin and kind of in particular corporate applications. Ryan works in the transport and logistics industries. Really exciting to hear his perspectives on how Bitcoin can be integrated into that particular industry. So Ryan, thanks so much for joining today. Excited to enjoy this, to discover this discussion together.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Look forward to talking some Bitcoin and some logistics.
Very cool. So for the audience, Ryan, be great to hear a bit about your background and professional background and how you discovered Bitcoin.
Yeah, so originally from the Midwest, came out here, spent most of my life in the Midwest, came out here just 2 weeks before COVID, didn't realize that COVID was going to hit like this. So my company, I was working for the railroad. My company moved me out here and came into the railroad industry out here. And before I knew it, I was in all the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And it was a really awesome experience. It got in my blood, and I found awesome people in the industry and amazing things. And so from there, I've always been into crypto per se from 2017. But in 2021 was really when I was orange pilled, as we would say in Bitcoin. So I'm sitting in the port of Long Beach for my prior company, which was in the railroad industry. And we get an email and it says, you are mandated to take the COVID vaccine. And at that time, it was not mandated. And so I went home, and I discussed it with my wife and my family. And I said, I'm not taking this shot, right? I'm not doing this. And so from there it went to, you're facing, losing your job, and the pressure was on, right? So our next step was, okay, where do we discover this, right? And look to like El Salvador and what El Salvador was doing. And discovered, how people are coming into Bitcoin. So from there, it was, put everything in that you had into Bitcoin and became orange pilled and realized that this is where this is going for my life, and where I saw it, right? And from there, and, then later on, about a year later, I left that job. I was under contract from moving out to the Midwest, so I was able to get out of there. And so then I was able to move on and get into more of what I feel like I enjoy and love, and that's moving boxes across the ocean.
Love it. No, it's a very fascinating story. I mean, that kind of it's interesting to hear different people's gateways into Bitcoin, and I guess this freedom aspect is one that often resonates with people. And it's the first time I've heard somebody kind of coming in from the kind of freedom away from mandated vaccinations into Bitcoin, but that's an interesting pathway in.
And you learn and you understand what that really got me to understand what decentralization is, right? And how important decentralization is in our lives as individuals. And I think we can discuss this later on, but I think corporations are going to see the importance of decentralization because of this new AI technology, right? And we should support AI. I'm all for AI. I try to learn everything I can about AI, but corporations are going to want to adopt, in my opinion, the decentralization technology, because if they do not, they will face you're putting all your information into AI, right? So you're putting your company's whatever business plans, you don't know what your workers putting into the AI system at all times. And that's a centralized, whether it's Chat GPT, whoever it is, that's a centralized. They're taking that information and they're forming their own. They have your business, right? They have your business model, they have your business plan. So with decentralization, you can I believe you can avoid that over the long run.
No, it's a great and really interesting perspective. I think this interface between AI data, the power of data, the
Yeah,
value within inherent in data, and then how do we trust? Can we trust centralized intermediaries, just like we do with
right.
money with Bitcoin? I mean, there's going to be, I think, really interesting blockchain based solutions to help us navigate that. So really cool that we'll save some time to explore that a bit further on. Very cool. So you mentioned you're in Long Beach now, Long Beach,
Yep.
California. So that's a major port terminal in the shipping industry. I think is it not the largest port in the US?
Yeah, I'm out of the port of LA, so we are the largest in the Western Hemisphere, and the port of LA, and then Long Beach is, a close second there. But yeah,
Okay,
it's a
wow,
major hub.
amazing.
Pretty
So how
amazing.
far is Long Beach from LA? Like they're fairly close together, are they not? Or
Yeah, we're part of LA County, so we're all lumped together there.
wow, okay. So they're separate, but they're both some of the biggest ones in the Western Hemisphere. Okay,
Yep.
massive complex then. And then I guess the interface there is that once the shipping containers come off at the terminal, then they get loaded off into trains. Is that, or is it mainly trucks, or is it both?
It's trucks, trains. Yep, either one. Yep, it can be. It's both major hub for both for trucks and trains. So
Very cool. I mean, this isn't really related to Bitcoin, but I guess with like these tariff threats that are happening, I mean, has there been a significant change in the flows of containers at those ports in
I mean, the Port of Los Angeles released their numbers for October. It was like 77,000 decline in containers since last year. I think it was 7,500 or something like that in containers. So is that the tariffs? Maybe not, but it's, definitely facing a little bit of a slowdown. And then you have, the, the Chinese vessels that are coming in and they're being, taxed at a higher rate. So all that. But again, those kind of instances are where maybe Bitcoin can be the mediator, right, in
Hmm.
this. So, you know, maybe a opportunity, a solution, because we really need Bitcoin to break into the logistics business.
Hmm.
It's in my opinion that's the most important business that Bitcoin can come into because we need trade. Trade's a good thing. Free trade, in my opinion, is a good thing. And we need that in all our, first world countries. That's what makes us so great. That's what makes us, a strong nation is that we
Hmm.
have all these resources that we can get from, our terminals. And Bitcoin, if they pay in these tariffs in Bitcoin or these fees in Bitcoin, maybe you suggest that we pay these and the fees become lower, or, as Bitcoin rises, your fees become lower in that sense, right?
Yeah, really cool. So let's maybe zoom out a little bit now as we dive into that topic. Like, what are the different applications that you think Bitcoin can have in the transport and logistics industry? You mentioned one about like I guess accepting fees and payments in Bitcoin itself. Are there other kind of categories of applications that you think could be worth discussing?
Yeah, I mean, anything for like fraud or safety or any of that stuff, Bitcoin will relate, right? Cross border payments is another big one, right? I mean, you're transferring this money across border. I'm not sure the length time it does take to make these payments happen, but Bitcoin with the Lightning Network, we can do that instantly, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that you can see in that business. Paying the fees is another thing. Tariffs, any of that, anything that involves the financial part of the terminal or railroads or anything in logistics,
Mm,
Bitcoin can make extremely more efficient
mm.
and cheaper to the company.
Totally. So like that instantaneous settlement and no FX transactions and these kind of like fees along the way, no intermediaries having to take a slice of the transaction.
Exactly. And I think once they realize this and they understand how they can adopt this into their business model, it's going to be a light bulb for them. They're going to be orange pilled, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen. They're going to be orange pilled. And I think that's where we struggle in the Bitcoin community is people don't understand this enough, right? They don't understand how this works. They just think this is some coin, right? And it's this, but they don't understand that it's, there's only 21 million and it's the perfect system, right? to be ran on this, and it can be broke divisible into Satoshi.
Mm.
And I think once corporation and people understand that, the light bulb will go off.
Totally agree with you. Be curious to hear how the sentiment is in the US and within the people you speak to in your industry as well. But certainly here in Europe, like there's still such skepticism within industry and the financial sector when it comes to crypto generally, but then Bitcoin especially for some reason. For whatever reason, they're more skeptical of Bitcoin than other things. And I think what we're seeing now is a big push from even the ECB, or maybe not the ECB, they want their CBDC.
Yeah.
European banks are now talking about euro-denominated stablecoins to kind of protect monetary sovereignty against the U.S. dollar stablecoins, which are getting a big push now from also the U.S. government. So I think they're starting to warm up to stablecoins, but I guess they're still, which provide the settlement on blockchain rails and stuff, but they're still seem to say, okay, there's more. I guess what we'll say is there's a more positive attitude towards using stablecoins for payments, which still disintermediates to a degree and gives you that instantaneous settlement. But they still don't seem that receptive to Bitcoin being used for payments. I mean, any reflections on that, stablecoins versus Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I see that as well a little bit. I think mainly, the sentiment around the U.S. is a lot of people I talk to, they just don't understand this, right? And they believe now that since Trump signed in the CBDC, that America will not get a CBDC, right? And I say that is the biggest farce ever. And I say to this, and I mean, you can back this up with facts and data if anybody's interested in, understanding this, but most people never are, right? But, I'm not a stablecoin guy. It's a centralized thing. The Federal Reserve's meeting on the 21st with Circle, Kathy Wood, Coinbase, and they're meeting on, digital innovation, right? So what that means is, AKA, digital money. And the only difference here is at this point is a stable coin in this point, right? Because all this will change over time once they get in and get their claws into this, right? It'll change over time. That's what we are. We're a nation of laws, right? And those laws change. So, the stable coin will come in. It will look like this decentralized thing. And, we know that a CEO is running the stable coin at the end of the day, right? Or a panel of people, right? Yeah. And there's where the danger lies, right? And I remember buying an Apple phone, and this was the most secure phone, and nobody could hack it. No government could get into it. And lo and behold, I think it was like 2016. There's a terrorist thing that happened in LA, and the government needed the information out of the phone. What happened? Apple bent the knee and gave the information. So, I mean, that's what it goes with stable coins, and I'm not saying this is for illegal things, but this is about what this boils down to is privacy, right? This boils down to individual privacy and individual having the freedom to do what they want to do with their money when they want to do it. And so the stable coin is not, in my opinion, is nothing more than a CBDC just labeled as a stable coin.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with you. I think if I had to choose one or the other, I would take the stable coin over the CBDC simply because private market tends to generate just a better solution. You got competition, but I tend to agree with you that it's just a matter of time until that, from a privacy standpoint, is almost the same as the CBDC, as the states just get, the NSA is getting all the information from Facebook and Apple and everybody, right? So, like they'll get all that information from the Circle and Tether and everybody, right? So
and that's what I mean by that, and so that I do agree with you that I'm a capitalist. I believe that the business world does it better, right? And we can do it more efficient in the business world. We do a better job, and that's what we need. And that's the great thing about free market. But at the end of the day, when it comes to our money, we need to have it on a decentralized platform where everybody has the opportunity to, have it, that there's no intermediates, there's nobody running it on the background. I mean, we saw it since 2008. I mean, really 1913 in the United States when the Federal Reserve was created. We've watched our money become less and less worthless, and in 1974, they took us off the gold standard, which, is another decline in the money, right? And so this is only another, it's another thing that causes more centralized control over the individual.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I guess just to close this one off, I guess I find it ironic, I guess, in the sense that people have more trust in things like stablecoins and stuff. And again, I don't want to talk for everybody, but certainly the sentiment here in Europe is like they'll trust the stablecoin because there is this like bank behind it or something, or and it's ironic because Bitcoin is much more trustworthy because you don't have to trust these people, right? You actually transcended the need for trust, right? So
right. And if I could just share one more thing, going back to how I became orange pilled, is that if I would have been under a CBDC or stablecoin and I said, I'm not taking that shot, they would have, at that time, yes.
Yeah.
And let's be honest and real, because that's exactly what they were going to do.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean,
that was the intent of all this.
Yeah, another just personal anecdote. I was living in part of the time here in Copenhagen during the COVID crisis, 2020, and then midway through 21, I moved to Vienna, and then I was kind of back and forth between Vienna and Copenhagen. But in Austria, they were on the verge of putting into policy mandated vaccinations, right? And people, rightly so, were like protesting in the street, massive protests, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is at the very tail end of the thing, and it was already past the big waves anyhow. There already was pretty much herd immunity. But like, it was just very interesting to see the government really pushing to like actually go to the point where they were going to say, we're going to put you in prison if you don't take a vaccination.
I know.
And it's insane, right? So, and in China, they do that, where they turn off people's bank accounts if you, if you don't do something.
Exactly.
The government does.
And this is what should draw people to Bitcoin, the individual to Bitcoin. AI should draw the corporations to Bitcoin. This is what should draw people to Bitcoin, the individual, is that this kind of scenarios here.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it's great to hear. And you're the first person that I've had on the podcast. I've only done 15 or 16 episodes, right? But you're the first guest that's really been this bullish on the privacy component. But I think it's great to have this perspective emphasized. So one aspect in the transport logistics intersection with Bitcoin that got a lot of news earlier this year was Panama talking about how they were thinking about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, right, Ryan, but my understanding was there's some sort of proposal that would say maybe we give preferential access to the Panama Canal for shipping companies that are willing to pay in Bitcoin. Is that what the proposal was roughly, or?
Yeah. I mean, so I was actually at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas and watching the mayor of Panama, and he came out and said it right on stage, and I was like, did he just say that? And it was pretty, it was just like, there was the aha moment, right? This is where they tried to break into the logistics business, because Max Keisner, he's a pretty smart guy, right? Very eccentric guy, but he's very smart, and people don't know how to take him. But I think he's totally behind that Panama deal, trying to get that in there. And I was just in El Salvador a month ago, and it's cross-border payments, right? And that's where we're going to go. And I think that's how we break into that business.
Cool. We'll have to come back and hear more about your experience in El Salvador. I'm curious to hear how that was. And Max Kaiser, just personally, like when I first got into Bitcoin, Max was one of the few personalities, let's say, that was like, icons on social media talking all about it a lot. So I was watching him on RT almost every day.
Yeah.
And it was, really, I love his eccentric style. It's great. Yeah. So what has been, okay, so maybe just two questions. What is the current status of that? I mean, is it still just an idea, or they?
Yeah, I think it's just an idea. I know that they keep shuffling it around, and it keeps coming up in the news, but it's still, I think it's probably still an idea, but in that case, then how do they do that? Well, they get all the terminals, or the logistic company on the Lightning Network, and that's how they pay it. And so, people, the terminal, or the logistics companies are going to have to understand how to get on that Lightning Network. And once they do that, there it is. There's the tipping point, right? As as they say. So I think that's going to be, maybe the opportunity that Bitcoin busts into logistics.
Cool. One technical question then is like, is there a reason why you're thinking it would be on Lightning and not on the main chain, these transactions?
I just think that, you know, corporations like to work with other companies, right? And I think that you have an opportunity for another company to come in and help them, right? And navigate it for them and show them, because everybody likes the process to be easy, right? And they don't like to reinvent the wheel a lot of times. So the wheel's already invented for them. And there's your opportunity for more growth in the Bitcoin businesses, implementing corporations onto the Lightning Network. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Kind of thing.
So the fact that Lightning Labs has like people that are actually, have built that there's some sort of like organization there that can support these companies.
Right.
Kind of the idea
Right.
versus when it's up to them to kind of figure it out themselves. Is that
right? Right. Yeah.
okay,
That's
cool.
that's how I see it. Maybe some will adopt the traditional model, but and then that would be great too. But I just don't see that, right?
Okay, cool. And then what's your perspective? Like, has this generated some buzz in the industry? Are certain companies, like, you're already a Bitcoiner, so you're kind of already enthused, right? But are like non-Bitcoiners within the industry talking about this now? Has it kind of generated some talking?
No, I don't think anybody's really like. I hope they are. I'm sure they're talking in the background. I'm sure a lot of people are Bitcoiners, but a lot of people here are looking for the next Dogecoin, the next Pepe, the next, as we say, shitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And that's all fine. I support that kind of stuff, but I always tell them that, if you do hit on that, and you do find one of those coins, buy Bitcoin. Because anybody that asks me, well, they always call me Crypto Kail or Crypto Ryan or whatever, but at the end of it, they always ask me what they should buy. And I say, buy Bitcoin. This is not, it's not rocket science. This is, we have 50 to 75 million people here that are into Bitcoin. You're hedging your bet you're hedging your bet with the people, with the masses at this point. So it's growing and growing. So, but on the flip side, if people want to buy the latest meme coin or whatever and try to make $1 million, free market, right? Do what you want to do. But I always tell them, if you make it, you should absolutely stick that in Bitcoin. Swap it over.
Yeah, I think over time it'll become more and more clear that it's kind of like the risk-free asset, right? I think that's going to be interesting because people see it's super risky right now, but like, certainly people who explore and dabble in other cryptos certainly see Bitcoin as the low risk asset, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, if we get specific about the news from Panama, right, about this idea of like them accepting Bitcoin and maybe giving preferential treatment. First of all, maybe it's what was the mayor's proposed? Like he was saying, like they would get more expedient access in the queue.
That's what. So at the conference, that's what the mayor was. Panama was saying was, I believe it was the mayor. Saying that you would get, first access to the canal, right? And I think that's pretty genius because your largest companies are going to take advantage of that. They're going to want to get their cargo through because that's what the name of the game is in logistics, right?
So that's a huge value driver, right? Is being able to not have to have your cargo sitting in a queue at the canal for however long. How much time will ships tend to sit in the queue typically?
I'm not sure of. I'm not really sure of that, but I think it's a while for them to sit there. Maybe all depends what the backlog is. What's going through there. How it works, but I don't know time frames on that. But I'm sure it's enough to make you want to pay in Bitcoin, right? To get through there, and it's a good thing for the customer as well.
Totally. And how does it work right now? I mean, is it kind of like you can pay extra to kind of get preferential access, or is it kind of first come, first serve? Or
I think it's first come, first serve. I don't think that you pay extra to that to get through the canal at this point.
Okay, cool. Okay, so then this news in particular, did it with non-Bitcoiners in the industry? Are they does this put Bitcoin a bit on their radar now, as far as you can tell? Or
I don't. I say. I talk about it. I say it out loud. whenever I can. Does it perk up anybody's ears? Maybe, but not. The thing is they don't see how this is going to break them into new avenues and new possibilities. So if you're paying with just to get through the canal first, that's going to open up the doors for many, many other things to come along. And the thing is you are going to be the trailblazer in this. Whatever company does this first, they're going to be the trailblazer. And they have hundreds of millions of people behind them that are Bitcoiners, that are like, you want to talk about free publicity, there you go. It will be on every Bitcoiner's social media page that, so-and-so company just went full Bitcoin on logistics, right? So, I mean, there's the avenues that it opens is amazing.
Totally agree with you. I think that's something that is hard to have business leaders recognize when they're not aware of how powerful a movement Bitcoin is becoming as the network of people involved in it grows and as their relative wealth grows and their excitement grows. And I think just speaking from experience, and also once I started Orange Wheel, it actually became like a Bitcoin company. You start recognizing that other Bitcoin companies prefer to use Bitcoin companies, right? So you kind of have this natural preference, and then like if you zoom out, like what if, let's say, Bitcoin reaches $1 million per coin by 2030 or 31, which I believe is not unrealistic.
No.
The wealth of this Bitcoiner community and network becomes extremely profound, right? This is a market segment that you definitely want to have on your side. And as you said, they're going to promote that company, and you have now a marketing team, you have all this stuff, right? And I think it's an underappreciated aspect of the benefit of making a Bitcoin strategy pivot.
Right. Well, it's like taking something out of the Elon Musk playbook, right? Because that's what he does. He does not. He didn't market Tesla. I think they've thrown out their first commercial maybe this year or last year, right? And that's what it is. You are taking the environment and using that as a marketing, opportunity. And I think that's really a big, big, big thing for you, And it doesn't have to be huge, right? It's just saying that you're going to accept Bitcoin, or you're going to, pay these fees in Bitcoin. And, maybe that costs you $1 million as a corporation at first, but what's the return in that, right? On investment.
Totally. And it feels like this on the customer side of the business is one benefit. But then as you brought the Tesla example, I think it also applies to many companies. If they want to do a Bitcoin strategy, these companies, people will prefer to become customers. If they have a choice of company A that is a Bitcoin company and company B that's not, they're going to be customers, but also potentially investors, right? If this is a publicly traded stock, maybe they'll buy a little bit of stock and become a bit of a retail investor to back them up, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, how many people bought GameStop because they announced that, they're going into a Bitcoin reserve, right? And that's what I mean. Once they start paying fees with Bitcoin and doing this with Bitcoin, then the next thing is the reserve, right? And that, in logistics, treasuries are the big thing, bonds are the big thing, the American dollar and currency is the big thing, all of which are losing value, right? So how do you hedge this? And that's you buy Bitcoin.
Totally agree. And it becomes, I guess, fairly obvious in retrospect if you were a company, let's say you were earning Bitcoin in fees, and then you decided to sell it, and so you had all of your reserves and retained earnings in dollars. I mean, you do a look back after 4 years and said, what would have been the case if we had held on to the Bitcoin? And it's like, we have a lot more than if we sold it, right?
Yeah. So. And I agree with that sentiment too, but I come from the kind of the Jack Dorsey look. I think that it needs to become a currency, right? To stay sustainable. Now that doesn't, and if we do that, then I think we see Bitcoin, past 10 million by 2030, right? If we start using it as a currency, because I mean, how do you make the Satoshi more valuable? And you deflate the rest of the prices across housing, groceries, the nation with Bitcoin. How do you do that? Well, you do that by making the value of Bitcoin continue to rise, right? And if we spend it as a currency, I understand that that hodling your Bitcoin is going to make it go up too as well. But I think that Jack Dorsey is on to something when he talks about spending it as currency. And that's going to be a hard one for the Bitcoiners now because they want to hodl, right? We all want to hodl. We're not breaking away. Although in El Salvador, I did use Bitcoin, with their Blink app, and but I transferred the money that I was going to spend at El Salvador into Bitcoin and spend it that way, right? So I think if you can come up with that kind of philosophy or psychology with it, maybe that's how you hodl your Bitcoin. It's no different than cash, right? You hodl it, and you spend what you would spend on your regular bills or your regular going out with.
Totally agree. And I think we will get there. I think it's a matter of time. My view a little bit on that is like once, your company A is saving in Bitcoin and most of its suppliers are saving in Bitcoin, they're going to say, well, don't give me the US dollar stablecoin. Just give me the Bitcoin, because why are we moving to some intermediary unit just to transmit it, right? Just transmit the stuff. But I think it might take time. But I think I'm totally with you in the sense that, first I'm with Jack Dorsey, that like, if we don't use it for minimum exchange, we might have the same problems as we had with gold, where you then you're only trading derivatives, and then you can't really verify the that it's not being doubly hypothecated and all this. And then secondly, I guess I'm kind of with you that like I think by promoting more spending, we're getting more people and more companies holding a little bit, right? That they wouldn't otherwise have, and that can be their gateway in to then be part of the circular Bitcoin economy.
And I think where we break into that is with the youth, right? And I keep going back to El Salvador, but they're doing some amazing things down there. And what Bukele is doing is, he has Bitcoin in the schools, right? They are teaching Bitcoin in the school, in the education system. So they are adopting them to the Bitcoin standard in schools from very young age, and that's no different than learning, Microsoft Office applications in school. When you come out, are you that you're ahead of the game, right? You've adopted this into your brain. You program this into your brain. So you have a more valuable tool when you go into the workforce, right? Because this has been taught. And I wholeheartedly believe what Bukele's doing down there with the education system is phenomenal and fantastic.
Very cool. No, so what brought you down to El Salvador? What was the basis of your trip? And tell me a bit about
Well, I've been wanting to go, and I've been wanting to see it, and I finally went. I went there to talk to a couple people and look at some land down there and start to see what's happening down there, right? I guess my main goal is, after leaving there, I'm going to go there here shortly again. I guess my main goal there is to one day live there, one day be a part of the El Salvador culture. That's the type of person that resonates with me, and the way Bukele's leading the country, and hopefully you'll see bigger things come into Central America with Bukele. That's the kind of leadership I love and support, right? And El Salvadorians, they are some of the most happiest, humble and content people I've ever met in my entire life, and it was a great experience. So we'll see what happens from there. But after I love my country, America, but the opportunity here is not what it used to be compared to what you have in El Salvador and Central America. There's major amounts of opportunity.
It's amazing. I think it's really cool that these small countries have the opportunity to be quite agile. That's one of the benefits they have, is they can change quite rapidly and implement novel ideas like Bitcoin within the country quite quickly. And then I think it's also just very impressive whether, some people think Bukele's means were a little extreme in terms of, cracking down on crime and stuff. But regardless of where you stand on that, it's just super impressive from my perspective to see how drastically he has changed certain aspects of the country so quickly, right? Like, it was one of the most dangerous countries in the world, 10 years ago. And now it's one of the most peaceful places in the world, right? So really impressive.
And when you go there, you can read the history, of all the Civil War and all the things that, took place. And it's, it's amazing that they're here where they're at, right? And they're coming into full swing, and they, look out for them to become AI leaders, and look out for them to become energy leaders with the volcanoes. If they, I met a couple guys down there that are, doing the geothermal or with the energy for the volcanoes, and it sounds like that's going to be a go, and that they're going to make this work. And don't be surprised if that doesn't, go all the way over all of Central America, with that energy. And that's a big, that's a big, that's a big tool for El Salvador if they do get that done.
Yeah, and I guess just so I understand, a lot of that energy would then also go into Bitcoin mining, I suppose, right?
Yes, yeah, they have a Bitcoin miner over there. Right by the volcano that they're mining Bitcoin. Yeah,
Super.
And what do databases need?
Yeah,
And
AI
I'm telling
compute
you,
and data centers and all this stuff. Right? It needs
yes,
power
and cheap power.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the constraints, certainly in the U.S. right now versus China in the AI war. From what I understand, a bit of the limiting factor is how much electricity generation the U.S. has versus China, which is
Yeah,
like just gone
mhm.
balls to the wall on coal, nuclear,
Yeah,
solar, wind, everything. And they're just like,
yeah,
whoa.
yeah. And we're rolling. I think we're kind of going regressing in the solar aspect of things. I think with the tariffs and those kind of things, it's going to hurt the solar industry, and it's really too bad. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I hope that we get more nuclear plants here, or we figure other means to get it. But we do need power, right?
Totally. Yeah, I heard they're like turning back on 3 Mile Island, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
I think
that's good things.
totally agree. And I think here in Europe, a bit they've gone through this weird thing in the last 10, 15 years where they've started being like, we have to reduce our power consumption. This whole thing is like,
Yeah,
there's one thing about like not wasting energy. I understand that. But like they've gone to this whole thing where it's like, we need to, using energy is bad. And it's like,
yeah,
using energy is like what causes human flourishing, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I always say, just like the CBDC, you guys start first, right? You start first, right? Let's, you want us on a centralized blockchain. Well, let's start with our governments on a centralized blockchain first, and let's see what goes from there,
it's
right?
never going to be like that, right? It's always
Right,
the rules for thee, not for me sort of
right,
mentality.
right.
Very cool. No, I think on the education side, I'm really impressed with what they're doing in El Salvador. I have to learn a bit more about that, but I think even in Canada where I grew up, like it's impressive how it's sad actually. I mean, how
Yeah.
maybe things changed, but there was no like mandatory, just basic economics and home finance taught in schools. I
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yep.
once you get to university, then you can of course take finance and economics, but like as your basic education, there's like literally nothing.
Yep. Yeah. It's the same way in the United States. If it wasn't for my dad and my grandmother, I wouldn't have had such a desire to learn about business, free market. They instilled that in me, right? The capitalist standpoint, and learning that business is good, trade is good, business creates massive opportunities for massive amounts of people, right? And the more you give them, and to be freer, the more they're going to produce for you, right? And that's going back to El Salvador. They the regulation there is low. It's not there, right? Compared to America, where we've just become a nation of regulation and laws.
Yeah, no, and Europe's probably even worse, right? Like no innovation. We think the US at least still has a lot of people. They attracts the
Yeah,
smartest people in the world, and like they let companies do a lot more than in Europe, where it's just like you can't get any infrastructure project done. It's like really
yeah,
prevents the further development and progressing technologically. So
yes,
I
it
agree
really
with you.
does. Yeah, and having and having free market and having employees that are in your free market who want to be leaders and have that drive to take your company to the next level is what does that for them. And we have that opportunity less than in America now, but more so than most nations, right? To do that.
Definitely. And like on the last note on the education piece, I was at Cheat Code in the UK. This is Peter McCormick's annual Bitcoin conference that takes place in his hometown of Bedford. And there was a lady there from Scotland who I think she's like a vice principal or something of a private school up in Loch Lomond. and where I think pretty good whiskeys from there as well. But they were starting to do now a Bitcoin economics course, not mandatory, but
Yeah.
optional for now at least. But they're using Safety and Moose to generate the syllabus. So it's great to see that there are these like
Yeah.
pockets of education thinking about how do we make sure the next generation at least is like better educated on Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, if people start learning Austrian economics, we're going to be good. We're going to be safe. It's going to be better. It's going to be great, right? I mean, and that's my desire.
Totally agree. And I guess, this, as bad as the whole like turmoil is right now economically with, the wealth disparity and everything, I think it's, at least the positive thing is that they're recognizing that the current economic monetary system just doesn't work. It has its flaws and it's breaking, right? So I think we will be searching for a new solution, right?
And that's the thing where Bitcoin, I strongly hope that everybody starts to wake up to this decentralization in their own lives. You can decentralize in your life by, farmers markets, taking care of yourself, learning holistic medicine instead of just walking into the doctor and telling them what is wrong, right? Those kind of things are the decentralization that we need.
Totally. So before we wrap up, Ryan, I mean, any other thoughts you might have on like, we talked at length about it, so I think maybe we already covered everything, but like if we zoom back into the industry you're most familiar with, transport and logistics, getting Bitcoin adoption by the different companies in that industry, where do you think the adoption is going to come from in the next couple of years? Is it going to be something like a Panama Canal really driving the impetus, or do you think there'll be other ways in which certain companies start getting exposure to Bitcoin? Like how do you see the different scenarios unfolding?
Yeah, I hope it's the Panama Canal, because I think that one it'll allow all the companies to come together, right? But the trailblazer is the one that will come ahead of all of it. So whoever the trailblazer is in this Bitcoin is going to, propel past the rest for, probably a number of years, right? But I do think it could be the Panama Canal, or if tariffs become worse, or, like ship to shore cranes, it's 100% tariff to get into America. We're stifling our our production as a result. If you can't get new ship to shore cranes to move cargo, those are 100% tariff. Maybe you suggest, I'll pay in Bitcoin. Can we knock the tariff down to 25%, right? That kind of thing. So there's all kinds of options to do. It's just getting people to talk and to put out a new idea. And there's a lot of innovative companies out there in the logistics business that are coming ahead, and many are, one right out of Copenhagen, that strive in automation, that strive in, making processes efficiently. So who knows who's going to be the trailblazer, but one of those scenarios will certainly probably pull everybody into the market.
Yeah, that's an interesting other angle, right? Where if the U.S. government was to accept a lower tariff if paid in Bitcoin, because they do want to build, if the Bitcoin Act passes and they want to hit that 1 million target, that's an interesting means by which to accumulate additional Bitcoin, right?
Well, yeah. And, it's time. Okay. Trump, JD Vance, all these people in the White House say, we love Bitcoin. We love Bitcoin. Well, now I think it's time for the corporations to say, oh, okay, you love Bitcoin? Here you go. We'll pay you in Bitcoin, and put the ball back in their court, right? And if you put the ball into their court, the people are going to, the Bitcoiners are coming. That's what's going to come. The Bitcoiners are going to come, and you have, 75 million, maybe 100 million Bitcoiners that are going to be right on that. The minute you say it, they're going to be right on that. And that's how you start to maybe make the shift in the logistics business.
Yeah, love it. And then the last point you kind of mentioned, because I am here in Copenhagen. We have quite a few shipping and logistics and then transport logistics businesses based here. Do you ever come over to Denmark? Are you here from time to time?
No, I've never been to Denmark. Would love to go, but yeah, I heard it's beautiful.
It is very nice. I mean, summers are gorgeous. Winters can be a little rainy, but today's a very beautiful autumn day. But it'd be cool if to meet up in person at some point, maybe in El Salvador, maybe in Denmark,
Yeah.
maybe in LA.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm planning on going to Mexico in the spring, so maybe I can try to tie on a little El Salvador side trip from there.
Yeah. And I think you would love El Salvador, and I think you seem like a very entrepreneur spirit, and I think you'll see amazing things there. And maybe, the collaboration there is lots of opportunity.
Yeah, if I do end up doing that, I'll have to pick your brain for some tips, to make sure I kind of make the most of that trip. That'd be very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up, Ryan?
I hope everybody, starts to learn Bitcoin, starts to understand it. But I hope everybody starts to understand decentralization. And if you start to understand decentralization, you're going to be led to Bitcoin. So I really, my hope is that people learn decentralization and start to utilize that in their life and become free from, free your mind.
Love it. Great words to end by. So thanks so much for your time. Looking forward to continue the conversation sometime in the future. Where can people connect with you if they want to get in touch?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Ryan Kail. Maybe next time we're on here, I'll have my Nostra account up and going the way I want it, and you can find me on Nostra.
All right. Awesome. I have to get my Nostra account going as well. So we'll see. We'll have a race to see who gets there first.
All right.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Have a great day.
Yeah.